Hey everyone, welcome to the Horror Show. I'm Cecil Laird.
And I'm Diane Shreve.
And we are here to do a sort of a crossover between our podcast and our video episode. This is going to be an episode all about someone that we've talked about a couple of times on the channel before. Once in podcast number 92, entitled Dynamically Dissecting Doug Jones. We talked about him once before. And then we talked a little bit about him during a live stream that we did that I need to do some editing on in order to put back up on the channel. But we wanted to do a proper, in-depth discussion about one of our favorite actors here without having to get sidetracked by audience comments and things like that. As much as we wanted to do an interactive episode, we figure let's not get sidetracked for this one. I want to do the gentleman justice after all he's given to us entertainment-wise over the years. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, what we are going to do is go into the career and sort of history of Doug Jones, the actor that we love so much. And I figure the best way to sort of get into that is to have each of us tell what our first experiences with Mr. Jones in cinema is, or even outside of cinema, if that is the case. But for me, it's something that I didn't actually realize was Mr. Jones until later on in my film appreciation career, when I had already seen, him as the Silver Surfer and him as the Fawn and the Pale Man and a number of other roles. Then I found out that he actually played a role much earlier on that was my first exposure, which was Billy in Hocus Pocus.
Hocus Pocus.
Yes, exactly.
A fan favorite, to be certain.
Yeah, for sure. He was the zombie that gets raised by Bette Midler's character, an ex-boyfriend, I believe, or something like that.
Her husband.
Her husband,
yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so that was my first exposure to Doug Jones, and he cut open his mouth in order to spit out some moths.
Real moths, by the way.
So we'll get to that, because that's a story worth telling. And also he just got to call her different names, and it was entertaining. Hag, witch, or whatever. Well, I can't remember. Trollop, yeah. A lot of really...
Bucktooth, something from... Bucktooth, flying... I don't remember what the rest of it. Anyway.
I don't remember either. It's been a while, but
it's been a while.
Nonetheless,
I'm gonna watch it again soon.
Yeah,
coming
very entertaining. Absolutely, it's time once again to do that. But very entertaining character, and definitely my first experience with Mr. Jones. Now, what about you? What do you remember being your first experience?
So my very first experience was I was going through a very kind of sad time in my life, and I have some friends who came to me and they said, "You know what, Diane? We think that you should really watch the Hellboy films because we think that it's something that you would really truly enjoy." And I went, the title though, Hellboy, because I love horror, but at the same time it just sounded so demonic, and it sounded like something that I just would not enjoy. And they said, trust me, just watch it. I watched it. Sure enough, they were absolutely right, and I absolutely fell head over heels in love with the character Abe Sapien, which is the very slender, very slow-moving, and empathetic, intelligent character that is the Blue Fish Man, who is Hellboy's kind of comrade in arms,
right?
On the films. And Abe Sapien was both, like I said, intelligent and really sympathetic and really empathic, and he always used his hands to feel everything out, and it was a character that I really truly connected with. And when I have a connection like that to a character, that's when I go and I find out a little bit more about, okay, who is the actor that played that character that brought about such a strong emotional response from me. And that's when I found out more about who Doug was as a person. And not just as an actor, and that's what made me love Doug Jones even more, is because he just seemed like this genuine, just sweet, kind, caring, consoling man. And so that's kind of my initial start to Doug, was through Abe Sapien.
Nice. So. That's as good as any. I mean, quite frankly, you're right. He brought so much to that character with his sort of very purposeful movements and very beautiful and through
Very-
everything that he did, but almost like he was
graceful.
sort of underwater while out of water.
Yeah.
Like it was
Which
really
he purposely
amazing.
was trying to do. He studied fish and how they moved before that role. And there's a story that he likes to tell that was the very first time he was ever in the Abe suit when he was doing a bunch of makeup testing. He was in front of a mirror kind of just testing some of his, very fish-like swimming movements. And apparently Guillermo was standing behind him and he didn't see. Guillermo del Toro, by the way, who's the director. And he didn't see Guillermo, and Guillermo went, that, just do that.
He didn't even realize Guillermo was watching?
No, he didn't.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's great. I mean, that just speaks to his capabilities. And just for the horror fans in our audience, just as a frame of reference, not only was he Abe Sapien, as you said, he was recently a number of the ghouls in Crimson Peak, right?
He played two different ones.
Two of them,
Yep,
right?
Yep, he played the Mother Ghost, and he also played Lady Sharp, the one with the hatchet in her head.
And then outside of that, he was in Legion as the Ice Cream Man.
Yep.
And then beyond that, he even played the Slender Man in a smaller budget movie.
The operator.
The operator,
Yeah,
okay.
The operator in Marble Hornets. It was called. It was Marble Hornets something.
Oops.
Oops.
Yeah, no, I did watch it, and I just remember exiting the screening thinking, I wish I had seen Doug Moore in this. But it was still, fun that he got to portray such an iconic role at this point.
Indeed, and there is a Slender Man movie that's in the works right now, and people keep messaging him like, Doug, you should be the Slender Man. He's kind of been there, done that. So that's done. Another thing that he was in recently on TV wise was two things: Falling Skies, which wrapped up about a year ago.
Cochise.
And on The Strain, he played two
characters. Oh my God, he was awesome on The Strain.
He was so great on The Strain. He played the original Master.
The one with the big makeup effect?
It was just one scene.
Okay.
When we see the Master as the very shriveled up sort of vampire that's feasting, who then gives his worms, his soul sort of thing to the big giant character.
Oh yeah.
I don't remember his name either. But the guy, he was the original Master. That was Doug.
Okay.
And that scene was directed specifically by Guillermo.
Nice.
And then he also was the leader of the Ancients. So when you see the Ancients in the semicircle, he's the one in the very middle.
Nice.
So.
Yeah, it's so funny how often Doug will pop up when you sort of least expect him. But yeah, and then he's also playing a very big horror icon in a movie that is being finished up, we hope.
Yep. It's in the process of being wrapped up. It could be done as soon as the spring, but of course we're referencing Nosferatu, which has been in the works for a couple years now. It was filmed in December of, not this most recent December, but the year before.
Can we pull up a picture of him?
Yeah,
there?
we definitely could.
All right, let's see. Oh, right here, right?
Yep, there we go.
Boom.
So the final makeup is going to be actually a little bit different than that. I can't say what or exactly how, but the final makeup is going to look a little bit, just a little bit altered, a little bit more, I should say a little bit closer to the Count
I thought I
Orlok.
saw one where his teeth are a little bit thicker, or are the teeth essentially the same in the next one?
The teeth have changed.
Okay.
The teeth have changed. There's also some hair added and some other effects.
Really?
Yeah.
Huh.
That have been changed up, but for the most
Did he
part,
have
the
hair
makeup
in the
stays the same.
original?
In the original, yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, Count Orlok did in the original.
So they're going back to try and make it more close to the original?
They're trying to make it look a little bit closer to the original.
Why?
Well, because it is a remix.
Well, but shouldn't they have the freedom to not have hair then?
Well,
if
it
it's
was
a remix?
It was just a decision that they made later on in the make. It looks good. Trust me, it looks good.
All right.
Yeah, it looks quite good actually.
Are they trying to differentiate from like the Strain Ancients and stuff like that? Is that part of the problem? Does it look similar?
I don't think it had anything to do with the Strain, to be completely honest. I just think it had everything to do with when the director, David Lee Fisher, sat down and decided to take a look at it with his makeup artist and talked about it with Doug, that it was just one of the changes that they decided to make. But like I said, when the movie comes out, you'll be able to see it, and all the fans will be able to see it, and I think everyone is going to be really, really happy with what's been shot. The little bit that I got to see was absolutely gorgeous, so,
Nice.
you know, I think it's going to please the fans.
It's funny because that Nosferatu is actually the reason that Diane and I met in the very first place.
It is, actually.
you approached us at the Phoenix Film Festival Industry Night in, I think, 2015.
Was it 2015 or was it 2014?
No, it was 15. I think.
Yeah, it was 15. Yeah.
But yeah, and then you followed up, busting my chops at Phoenix Comic-Con the following year. But nonetheless, I'm glad that you did because we became friends, and it's been a fun sort of relationship here, as far as talking about the different creative stuff that we're into, and then the common ground where we specifically find a wonderful island that we can call Doug Jones. It's an island that we don't butt heads on with some of our tastes. But, I'm sure we're not alone in that. A lot of people love what Doug has done, whether they realize it's him or not, quite frankly. So I think that's as good a place as any. Let's jump in and sort of start at the beginning. Do you think that's how we should do this? Or what do you think is the best way to go from here?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely would love to talk a little bit about the progression of, where Doug started to how he came to where he is today, where he's now slaving away working on Star Trek Discovery.
And then let's finish out with us going over some of the questions that if I ever got a chance to ask him, I should not do so.
Yeah.
You can give me those answers now.
And maybe in somewhere in between we can weave in some personal stories.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
Sounds good.
Let's do it. So go for it.
So
lead us into the diabolical. Oh God, what's a D word for world? The diabolical dimension of Doug Jones. Lead us down the path.
Diabolical.
I don't know.
Oh no.
Well, diabolical
he's
doesn't
a
necessarily
sweetie.
mean bad, does it?
Diabolical
I guess
is
it kinda
kind of
does.
like evil.
Dynamic. How about the dynamic dimension of Doug Jones?
Dun dun dun.
Yes. Sorry, diabolical was a bad pull. But he has been diabolical in a number of roles.
He has. He has.
I meant
indeed.
it in a caring, complimentary.
There's love.
Go ahead.
So, in the beginning.
Oh boy, here we go.
Doug grew up in Indianapolis.
I was just there for training for my new job.
You were just there in
Literally,
Indianapolis.
Yep. Very good weather in that place, I gotta say. For being the middle of the summer here, it was wonderful out there.
Oh,
it was rainy and gorgeous and windy and wonderful.
That sounds lovely.
Loved it. Big fan.
Anyway, so yes,
Although no Mexican food. Big bummer there. Anyway.
This is true.
Go ahead.
So yeah, he grew up in Indianapolis and he went to Ball State University.
Okay.
And
Ball State University?
Ball State University.
I'm sure he's heard them all.
He was also the mascot there. Charlie Cardinal.
Oh, it wasn't Tommy Testicle?
No. Tommy Testicle.
Well,
that is an actual...
For Ball State University, you have to imagine.
No, there is actually a mascot that's, I think it's in Canada, that is, it is a testicle.
Oh, really?
Is
it called Ball UK?
Anyway.
Or ball.ca? That's what it would be, not UK. Sorry, go ahead.
I think we're getting a little sidetracked.
Sidetracked,
A little bit. It's all good. So, at Ball State University, he was majoring in radio productions.
Okay, that's awesome.
Initially, he was thinking, okay, maybe I could be a radio announcer or a DJ of sorts.
A man with a voice. Gotcha.
But he was then approached one day by this senior student who said, "Hey, have you heard of doing mime?" And Doug was, question mark, question mark. He went to a mime show of this group called Mime Over Matter.
Wow. So was it a miming improv group or something?
It was kind of a miming improv group, miming show group that put on these different performances.
Okay.
He went and saw one, loved the stories that they were being told, and immediately wanted to join. And so through that group, that is how he started out in his acting profession as a mime. I think there might even be a picture of Doug Jones.
Let's check it out.
As a mime. Oh, here we go. Because later on, Doug created a book called Mime Very Own Book, which is, by the way, quite hilarious. It's the perfect coffee table
And
book.
it's going to take a while to load because that's the kind of computer that this is.
Oh no. Either way, the book is hilarious. It has a few hundred photos inside of it of him as a mime, but in different costumes and stuff. Like the little mime-aid.
Is that Bride of Mimenstein?
Yeah, that I think it's like, Bride of Mimenstein, the evolution
Oh, that's
of mime.
cool.
Yeah, there's all sorts of interesting pictures within the book. I highly, highly recommend that book, by the way. So
It's
the
literally
mime
still trying to load
background
it.
has come up, multiple times in multiple ways.
Wow. That's interesting.
Yeah.
All right. So what was next?
So after he became a mime, he and his wife, Mrs. Laurie.
Over 5 in print, over 2 sold. Nice. Sorry, go ahead.
I'm one of the two.
It's a good joke. It's a good joke. I like it. It's good.
He decided to pretty much, he and Mrs. Laurie packed up their bags from Indianapolis, and they came over to Los Angeles to be closer to showbiz.
Okay.
However, his initial reason for moving wasn't to be in showbiz. He was to be a banker.
Oh, really?
Yes, he was going to be an operations manager of a bank.
Okay.
And 8 months into his 9 months of training, they looked at him and they said, "You're not very good at this," and they fired him. So he suddenly was out on his luck, and he had all this free time. He had some unemployment checks coming in. So it was through that time frame that he had the opportunity to truly pursue acting, and he landed his very first ever gig in a commercial being a dancing wrapped up mummy for Southwest Airlines.
Is it on here?
It might be. I'm not sure.
Okay. All right, continue.
And after that, he did a couple other commercials, and then soon landed a gig that was his first, in a way, kind of his first breakthrough.
Okay.
Which was as the big crescent moon head man, Mac Tonight. And
Oh, you kidding me? Wait. Is that the guy that
played the piano.
Still the One? Did they do Still the One with that guy? Wait, what was his song? What was the song that he did mostly?
It was like, it's 2 a.m., it's Mac Tonight, something like that.
Huh.
The commercials are there online if people want to watch them. But if Doug Jones Mac Tonight, if you look that up, then there's tons of pictures of him with the head.
Wow.
So
That's
yes,
cool.
he wasn't the one singing the song. That they had someone else dub over.
This guy.
Yes.
Okay.
I think that's actually an animation of it, but
That's great.
But
wow,
he was
weird.
sitting at a piano and miming and pretending to play the piano to the Mac Tonight song, and he did 32 commercials as Mac Tonight.
Wow.
So that really was his first.
Look at that
big
frock
break.
of hair, man.
His hair is naturally very curly.
That is amazing. And he's a ginger?
Yes.
Wow. That's awesome. Wow, what a piece of the puzzle that I never knew. That's crazy.
So that was a big start for him, for sure. And that's kind
So
of...
that's him.
That's him.
Wow, what a trip. Wow, okay, sorry. I'm tripping out on that just a little bit. That's kind of strange, man.
But the thing that's interesting about Mac Tonight specifically was that's what got him known in the industry.
And so he actually played and everything?
he knows a little bit of piano, but not a whole lot.
Okay.
But that role is what got him known for wearing big, heavy, awkward makeups and not complaining about it and being a pleasure to work with.
Wow.
So it was from Mac Tonight that a bunch of other, works started to kind of spiral off from that.
Interesting.
So that's why Mac Tonight was kind of like his first, little big break.
I know I'm probably a ways off, but when we get to Buffy, let me know, because that'll be my second exposure to him.
Oh, okay.
All right?
Yeah.
So continue on.
So I think a next big notable role for him would be one of, your favorite or I should say one of your favorites, the one you mentioned earlier, which is Billy.
Yeah, okay,
Yep.
Hocus Pocus.
So we went to Hocus Pocus.
Right.
He did a few other works in between there. But Billy Butcherson, to this day, is a very well-known, well-loved character. There he is.
Yep.
Now, there is that scene that you mentioned earlier, Cecil, with
Mm-hmm.
him cutting his mouth open.
Right here.
And the moths the moths flying out. Those were real moths. So Doug had this contraption in his mouth that had 3 different moths in there, or was it 2? Either way, he had a couple moths in there. And he also had some dust in this little container taped to the top of his mouth. And then they had to glue these little seams onto his mouth. Then he had to take the knife, do the seam, quickly cut it open, spit out the dirt, and open his mouth wide enough for the moths to fly out. And they had to keep doing the take over and over again because moths don't fare very well in a damp environment. So the moths either kept dying in his mouth, or they would kind of fly out and then go.
Gosh.
And can you imagine, having to have both dirt and moths in your mouth, and your tongue's, kind of pressed back to your throat, and then having to still act while under makeup and prosthetics and hair and everything else under hot white lights all together. I mean, this is just an example of the kind of work that Doug has been known for through the last, 3 or so decades.
Wow.
So
yeah, what a sport, man. That would trip me out if they kept, having problems with it. I would have a hard time continuing, but he's a trooper, man. He carried through. All right.
Yeah.
So what's next? Billy Butcherson is pretty huge, though.
Billy Butcherson is pretty huge, and I found out that Spirit Halloween this year has Billy Butcherson Halloween masks.
Really? That's about time. That's awesome.
So he's the movie when it first came out, it was a flop because it came out in the summertime.
That's such a bummer because it was so fun.
It was so fun, but then it became this cult classic, and now, of course, just about everyone's seen it.
Mm-hmm.
So moving on up, we have other projects like, if you want to go ahead and talk about Buffy.
Yes. Which one was this?
That's Skin and Bones. Skin and Bones is one of my favorites.
Is that the Wendigo one?
That's where he plays the Wendigo.
Yes. That is a good one. Okay, well, we got to touch on that too. But
yes. But
all
go
right,
ahead.
so,
talk a little bit about him in Buffy.
Yes. So in Buffy, if you guys are a fan, in the 4th season, they did something very new. They did a lot of experimentation when Joss was still heavily involved, and one of them was appropriately, when speaking to you, because I have made a silent film and you have now written a silent film. This was the silent episode of Buffy, where at the very beginning,
called Hush.
These evil gentlemen show up and steal the voices of everyone in Sunnydale. And exactly, it's these, I'll pull it right here, the gentleman.
There you go.
Is that him in the front?
That's him in the front,
yep. So that was the gentleman. They had these horrifying rictus grins on their faces, and they floated. They did not step so much as glide around. And they were super scary, and, Doug right there, that's an excellent one right there.
That's even better.
And I like this too. I mean,
There he is.
Yep. He was really good in just his ability to work with simply his physical form. That's another good one right there.
So part of the way that they got the floating effect to happen was that they had him and his kind of right-hand man was played by Camden Toy.
Right.
And he and Camden Toy would be all suited up to these harnesses that were underneath the suits. And they were then, hoisted up so that they had that floating effect, and then someone would be behind pushing this cart that they would be on. Well, there was one time, and I hope I'm getting this story right, I think I am. I heard it once, where they were pushing the cart down a hill, and the cart kind of got away from the man who was pushing the cart, and the cart kind of became a runaway cart as a result.
Wow.
And tipped over, and they fell into the grass, but they were still all hoisted to the harnesses, so it was a big point of hoit.
Wow. Jeez.
So it was, even that role was not the easiest to do. That, makeup and prosthetics and glue and everything aside, you still had this runaway cart that happened, and all the different harnessing and everything that they had to go through. Which harnessing is something that Doug is also very familiar with. For example, he had to do a lot of harnessing for another project with the Silver Surfer.
Okay. That is one I can pull up. I actually had just written down what's the most painful piece of practical makeup effects he's had to endure.
Most painful piece?
See, I wasn't sure if it would be like that. These contacts are supposedly not easy to keep in.
No, and he is not the biggest fan of wearing really horrible contacts for a long time. But that's a really good question.
Okay, cool. So I'm writing down the good ones.
Yeah.
Okay, so what Silver Surfer I'll bring up now. Okay.
So the Silver Surfer.
Okay. From Fantastic Four 2.
Fantastic Four, the sequel.
Right.
So a lot of people will look at you and be like, no, that's Lawrence Fishburne. No. Lawrence Fishburne's voice was later dubbed over Doug's, but he's the one who initially gave the performance. So as you can see, that's him on, look, another harness. That's a hip harness. And there's others of him in these giant animatronic rigs. I don't know if you can find one of those pictures, perchance.
Right here?
It's a giant rig. Maybe I can find one for you. But that's an example of one. But it's the one I'm thinking of was a lot bigger, where it had this big mechanical swoop that went up and down and all around, and that way they could get the shots of him flying while on the magical Silver Surfer's silver board. So he worked with actors such as Chris Evans.
Oh, really?
Who, yes, Chris Evans played
Johnny Storm.
Johnny Storm, the Human Torch.
Mm-hmm.
And there we go.
Nice. Oh.
There we go. There it is.
All right. There we go.
So that's an example of one of the rigs that they had set up for Doug.
Wow.
Yeah.
Jeez.
So talk about harnessing.
Good Lord. And so he just have to do different movements from there, and then they'd move him?
Yes.
Or they'd move him during the shot?
They would move him during the shot. They would have him stay still in certain areas. And I think they also had some stuntmen come in and do some different poses as well. But for the most part, they had him doing most of it.
Good Lord.
It was very, very difficult on him, for sure. Very intensive. A lot of work. And so it's a shame that they dubbed over his voice with Lawrence Fishburne, because he did put a lot of hard work and effort, like I said, into that particular performance as the Silver Surfer.
I would love to hear the original track restored with him,
Right?
Like, that'd be amazing.
That would be amazing.
All right, so what was next?
So next after
We already
that,
we talked about Skin and Bones, but where does that belong in the timeline?
Skin and Bones would probably be right after the Silver Surfer,
Okay.
or around there.
All right, and that was part of what? Was that part of
Fear Itself.
Fear Itself,
It was-
not the original one.
No, it was a part of a TV series that happened.
No, I know, but Fear Itself started out as Masters of Horror, and then when it moved to a different network, they changed it to Fear Itself.
Mm.
So, all right, Skin and Bones.
There we go.
Oof. Yeah, man, him playing the Wendigo is awesome. Oh, jeez. That's an amazing shot. Those teeth, man, those teeth. Those have to be fake, right?
Yeah. Doug does have an amazing ability where he can kind of peel back his lips and jut his jaw forward and create this illusion that his teeth are kind of popping out of his mouth.
Right.
It's just one of the wonderful things that he's able to do. Now, see, that first one,
Yeah.
yeah, I think those are fake teeth. I'm fairly certain.
Yeah. All right. So what
All right.
was next?
So, what were some of your other favorite ones? Did you want to talk a little bit about Pan's Labyrinth, or did you want to talk a little bit about...
Yeah, Pan's Labyrinth was awesome, obviously, because of not only the faun, but of the Pale Man. The Pale Man was really horrific, being a weird, jowlsy dude, like, with skin flesh hanging from his body, and no eyes, except when he held his hand up, you could see an eyeball was in the middle of each palm, so that was a creepy visage the entire time. But yeah, I mean, outside of Pan's Labyrinth, what was after that? Because Pan's Labyrinth was huge. I mean, let's just talk about it since we're there. Go ahead.
Well, Pan's Labyrinth, I mean, there's so much that you can say about this film. I mean, it was nominated for multiple Oscars. I think it actually won one or two, if I remember right. It played at all kinds of film festivals all across the globe, won tons of awards with those as well. It has been hailed often as one of the best films that Guillermo del Toro has ever made.
Mm-hmm. Well,
And
it
just-
is, for sure.
For sure. I mean, just if you look at not only the story and the acting, but you just look at the world that it created and the beauty behind it and all the intricate details that they poured into the makeups, and the costumes and the characters and the clothes and everything. I mean, just simple things like that. And there's Doug suffering. Poor Doug.
Ugh, that's rough. It's like, ugh, these are heavy. But man, I mean, him willing to put in that work makes all the difference for us as viewers.
Yeah.
I mean, God. And you said, what was the other ironic thing about this? He didn't know any Spanish?
Oh, so yeah. He initially when Guillermo wrote the script for this, he sent it to Doug. And he said, you know, Doug, I want you to play the faun, and no one else can play it but you. And Doug was absolutely overwhelmed and with this compliment, because it was very sweet of Guillermo, but at the same time it was putting a lot of pressure on him. So he read the script, and which had been translated, and he thought, oh, that's beautiful, but I know that it's going to be in Spanish, and I don't know a lick of Spanish.
Mm-hmm.
And Guillermo initially said, don't worry about it, Doug, you know. Well, you can just say 1, 2, 3, 4 and put the emotion behind it, then we'll dub someone over you. And Doug thought about that later and went, can't really do that because I can't emote really that well by just going 1, 2, 3, 4. And so he decided that he would take it upon himself to learn the script in Spanish, learn how to properly pronunciate all the words,
Right.
learn you know, the meaning behind everything, and not only learn his lines, but he had to learn the lines of whoever he was working with in the scene, because as you can see, his character as, you know, El Fano or Pan, he had these big horns and everything. Well, underneath that is servos, which are these little machines that are turning everything and turning all the little ears and the eyes and making it all blink and move and everything.
Right.
So
Such complicated stuff to coordinate.
because of that, though, it created this buzz and all this noise.
Mm-hmm.
So he couldn't really hear what they were saying and didn't really understand what it was they were going to say. So he had to kind of memorize both of them in order to successfully pull off his role. And in the end, they dubbed over him anyway.
Oh, really? So that's not Doug's voice then?
It's not Doug's voice,
Okay.
no. It's not, but it's still him saying all the words and everything, and, you know, he was still very dedicated with what he did for that.
Wow.
So.
Well, that's still impressive, and of course, nothing less than professional from him.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, and the Pale Man, that was mostly body acting, not much to actually say as the Pale Man. But what came after that?
Of course, there was the second Hellboy movie that happened, but a film that I would like to mention is one that's probably not as well known.
Okay.
It's called My Name is Jerry.
Okay.
And the chronological order of some of these films, there we go, maybe a little bit askew because I'm just going by memory. But My Name is Jerry is...
Alison Scagliotti, I love her.
It's probably my favorite Doug film of all time.
I loved her in Warehouse 13.
Yeah?
I actually, one of my characters in Bracer is named after her.
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I did not know that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, My Name is Jerry is one of Doug's... It's a more prominent one that he did where, thankfully, he is not in an intensive makeup. My Name is Jerry is a story that's all about life-changing... That's essentially it, going through and making changes in your life and making positive changes, whether that's having family members coming back into your life, or finding new love, or finding new passions, or getting a new job, or a new car. It's all about middle life crisis. It's about young life crisis, also known as quarter life crisis.
Mm-hmm.
It's about a man who's very confused at where he's at in his life, who he is, what he wants to do with the remainder of his life. And as a result, he goes on this journey of self-discovery. And because of his journey and the conclusions that he comes to, which has, by the way, a very tender, very touching ending, it's a film that connected with me, because when I very first saw it, I was going through a pretty hardcore quarter-life crisis myself. So it is a film that always just strikes me to my core. Nice. So if anyone is a fan of Doug and would like to see him outside of his typical more popular and well-known prosthetic or horror roles, this is a really great film to kind of sink your teeth into. I think you can find it online to watch for free on various sources.
Nice.
So, or you can order it on Amazon on DVD. So
it sounds like something I should watch at some point here in the near future.
Yeah,
sure.
I can always bring it over.
Cool.
So, kind of bringing things up to speed, there were a lot of other projects that Doug has done. I mean, Doug has done over 150 different projects.
That's so crazy. Prolific.
He's extremely prolific. I mean, he is one of the single most sought after creature performers and actors in Hollywood. Mm-hmm. So he's an exceedingly busy individual. And we've mentioned quite a few things that are some of his more popular known works. But something that I do want to take mention of is two things. First is The Shape of Water.
Right.
The Shape of Water is his newest upcoming film. And The Shape of Water stars him, and I think it's Sally Hawkins, I think her name is. And it's a love story. It's a love story set during the Cold War era, and it's another Guillermo del Toro film. And no, it's not, because it doesn't have anything to do with Abe Sapien. I know that the makeup and the design of the creature looks a little bit similar to Abe Sapien, but we just want to clarify, not Abe Sapien.
Got it.
or related.
All right, I think we're clear on that now.
So it like I said, it is a love story because the main character, she is a mute. She can hear, but she cannot speak. And so she communicates strictly with sign language. And she comes across this creature who does not have a name and is never given a name at any point during the film. And the creature comes to learn sign language and learning how to communicate with her. And they create this bond, and then obviously the scientists who found him want to do experiments and want to dissect him and take him apart and learn more about where he comes from and if he's a threat, etc. And of course she doesn't want anything with that to happen to him because she's fallen in love with him. So that's the premise of The Shape of Water. So that is coming to U.S. theaters December 8th,
Nice.
if I am remembering right off the top of my head, which I think I am. And that should be a good one. It's already starting to play right now in film festivals, so soon we'll be able to hear whether or not it's going to be winning any awards.
Nice. Well, I'm super interested to see it. I love water-based movies anyway, and I've never been a big Creature of the Black Lagoon fan because they haven't done anything with it since, really. But I'm glad that there's at least a bit of a creature inspiration going on here, and who better to play it than Doug? So it makes a lot of sense, quite frankly.
I mean, Doug and I have joked that the creature from The Shape of Water is basically the love child of the Creature of the Black Lagoon and Abe Sapien.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why you kind of have a mixture of the two to create this beautiful creature who's...
Oh, is that how they did that? Okay, that makes sense.
And I will throw in a fun little tidbit that there was a nickname for the creature on The Shape of Water, which was Charlie.
Charlie, okay.
Yeah.
What does that represent?
Like Charlie Tuna.
Really?
Yes. That's Guillermo's sense of humor for you.
All right. Well, and what's the other thing that we should talk about?
And the other thing we should talk about, of course, is Star Trek Discovery, which Doug has been absolutely slaving away on since January, and it is now here almost the beginning of September.
That's not it. That's Falling Skies.
That's Falling Skies.
Well, here's that with him on it, but...
If you type in Lieutenant Saru, there we go. There's him. Then down, nope. There we go. Yeah, no, middle.
Ah. Oh, wow. He's tall.
Yes, so his makeup was designed by creature and concept artist Neville Page.
Okay, from Face Off.
From Face Off, yep. And loved Neville Page dearly. However, Neville decided to give him hooves. Now, why Neville decided to give him hooves, I don't know. Because it made a 6'4" man even taller. And so, he, as you can see from the design of his costume, he has no heels. And so because of that, he's walking on his toes the entire time, which is exceedingly painful.
Yeah, I would imagine so.
But he is very excited for Star Trek Discovery to come out. He plays Lieutenant Saru, like I said earlier, who is the chief science officer on the Starship Discovery. The show also stars Jason Isaacs, Sonequa Martin Green, and Michelle Yeoh.
Nice.
That you can all see there in that photo.
Mm-hmm.
So it is going to be premiering on September 24th. Initially, the first, I think it's the first 2 episodes are going to be shown all together as like one big long feature.
On TV.
On TV, on CBS.
And then they have to go to the app in order to...
Yep.
Gotcha.
Everything from there on out is going to strictly be through CBS All Access, which is basically CBS's version of Netflix.
Brutal.
So it's going to be about $6 a month to be able to watch Star Trek Discovery online.
Gotcha.
So it's just one less coffee a month, one less trip to McDonald's or, whatever.
It's something to be excited about anyway, especially
it is.
considering how hot the property's been.
It's Star Trek. I mean, Star Trek is a huge property, and we haven't had a Star Trek TV series in, well over a decade, so it's high time that it comes back, and with as much production value that CBS has been pouring into it, and it also has the backing by Netflix because it's shown on Netflix across the world, everywhere except for here in Canada.
Oh, of course.
So,
well, it's exciting anyway.
It is exciting.
So there you go, guys. That is sort of an up-to-date and into the past look at Doug Jones's career. There's stuff we couldn't even touch on because there's just so much.
Yeah.
And we wanted to have time to let Diane tell a couple of stories. So please, by all means, go for it.
So I just would like to tell the story of when I very first met Doug Jones.
Okay.
Because I know that there's a lot of people out there who would like to meet Doug, who've met Doug before, or who have the opportunity upcoming perhaps to even meet Doug. And I just would like to tell my perspective of it and kind of give people a heads up of how he interacts with his fans.
Okay.
So, like I said, I had a kind of a quarter life crisis that I was going through when I was very first introduced to Doug Jones. And that's when I had seen him in Hellboy. That's when I watched My Name is Jerry. That's when I found out more about who he was as a person. And when you really come to know a little bit more about Doug, you find out that he is just this genuine, sweet, kind, caring, consoling individual who just loves everybody, and he makes you feel like $1 million when he's with you. And he said one of his goals in life, and one of the things he wishes to be remembered by, is that when he's with someone, he wants that person to feel like that they are at that moment the most important person and thing in his life.
Mm-hmm.
And that when, he leaves, that they have that impression.
It's a messed up way to prove it, but okay.
I wouldn't say that. I think it's more the feeling of wanting to feel that you have affirmation and love than anything else. So he definitely made me feel that way, and through his ability of being this pure, good, loving human, I decided to write him a letter telling him how he had helped me through this kind of dark time in my life. So when I went to meet him the very first time, which was July of 2014, at a convention called FantasyCon, I went out and I stood there and I was shaking with nervousness holding this letter because he meant so much to me, and I just really was excited to give him this letter, but and finally meet him. But at the same time, I was so scared because I'm a bigger girl, and he was, I guess I should say, an idol of mine, and still is. He's someone who inspires me every single day, and I look up to him. And I kept letting people go ahead of me in line where I would see him because I was so nervous. Finally, I worked up the gumption to go and see him, and when he saw me, he just ran right over to me, and he threw his arms around me like he'd known me his whole life. And this is what he does for everybody when he meets his fans and when he meets people, is that he is very touchy-feely, he's very hugsy, he's very lovey.
It's awesome.
And he just pours all that good feeling right into you, and immediately my nerves were just obliterated. They were gone.
Wow.
And when he hugged me and he called me beautiful, and he loves like touching people's faces and doing face cupping and all this other stuff. And he even read my letter that very night. And
That's awesome.
He's just so sweet and so kind. So I just wanted to share that because I was so nervous, and I had such a deep reason for meeting him, and yet I had this amazing, beautiful meet with him, and now Doug and I are acquainted, and we've known each other for a couple years now, and it's a friendship that I'm exceedingly grateful for. And I encourage anyone and everyone, if you have the opportunity to meet him at a convention, at a show, at an event of any kind, that you definitely should go meet him, because meeting and seeing Doug is something that will definitely at least brighten your day. So.
Well, that's as good a reason as any, quite frankly. God, I want to know, does anyone else have any Doug Jones stories? Have you managed to meet him at a convention, or do you just really love his work? And if so, what of his work do you love so much? But before they even get into that, do you have anything else you wanted to share? I know you said stories, but I don't know if we want to give them all now or save some for
Yeah,
later
I
too.
think maybe saving some stories for another time might be a really good idea. Just
Yeah.
have like a story day.
Yeah, exactly.
Because there are some funny stories that I could tell.
Yeah,
for sure.
and I wanted to make sure we had this sort of history for everyone,
Yeah.
and now I
That's
have
why
a
we're
cat in my
calling it
arms, too.
Deconstructing.
Exactly. So, but if you guys couldn't tell, we're obviously humongous fans,
Yep.
and if you guys have liked any of the things that we've talked about over the course of this podcast, then you know, like Doug Jones, and you should share that love with everyone around you. And come back here when we talk about him again in the future, as I'm sure we will.
I'm sure we will.
But thank you very much for coming on and sort of leading the way on this one. I
Thank you for
appreciate it.
having me. I
Yep,
appreciate it.
no problem. And until next time, I've been Cecil Laird.
I've been Diane Shreve.
And remember,
Stay scared.